In today's video, I'll be going over the top premium ships to buy as of 2026. We'll be going over a list of ships that I recommend that are good in both PvE and PvP modes. And how I'll be doing this is going over the tier 8, 9, and 10 of each class, since I know everyone has different price ranges and favorites of their playing of each class. So let's get started with the battleships. The first one I'm recommending is going to be the tier 8 Brandenburg. The tier 8 Brandenburg is a German battleship that has essentially the same exact hull as the Torpedoes, but it has a few key differences. It's going to have 12 guns instead of the Torpedoes' 8. The guns are smaller, but it has a faster reload, which gives it a higher DPM for both AP and HE. This helps it when it gets up tiered, so it's a little bit more flexible than the Torpedoes, which is really nice. The secondary DPM is also higher as well, which allows it to do better in PvE modes than the Torpedoes. It also gets torpedoes as well that are essentially the same as the Torpedoes. You can get it for 11,300 doubloons, so I'd highly recommend it since it's very flexible and you're able to play it in both PvP and PvE modes. And if you get up tiered, you're able to use the HE on the main guns to be able to start fires on those higher tier battleships since EP is not going to be as viable. For the tier 9, I'm going to be recommending two different ones, one for PvP and one for PvE. Now, for the first one is going to be the Kearsarge. This is going to be for PvP. The reason why I recommend it for PvP is because it has essentially 12 North Carolina guns, and you're able to build into the accuracy mod in the 6th slot, which makes the guns very accurate. It costs 18,300 doubloons. I'd highly recommend it for PvP since the guns are amazing, and it also has planes as well, which help spot, as well as doing a lot of damage to cruisers and battleships. You're able to make enemies turn to their sides to allow you to smash them with the guns. Now, if you're more of a PvE enjoyer, then I'd recommend the Pommern. The Pommern isn't as good in PvP, but it does amazing in PvE. One of the best tier 9 credit farmers in operations. I would highly recommend it for that, as well as playing it in asymmetricals. So if you're more of a PvE enjoyer, then I definitely recommend the Pommern. Has good torpedoes, has 6-kilometer hydro, very tanky armor, as well as good survivability. It has 12 guns on it as well, which put out a lot of damage, but its main strengths are those 12-kilometer secondaries, which do put out a lot of damage. Moving on from the tier 9s, let's move on to the tier 10. For the tier 10, you're going to have the only one that's available is going to be the Sibir. Sibir is essentially a brother version of the Kremlin. It has a slightly less armored deck. The armored deck on the Kremlin is 50 millimeters, while this is 40 millimeters. It also comes with a special heal that it's a total time consumable, as well as having a regular DCP. It also comes with 11.3 kilometer secondaries, as well as having an F key that's fueled by the secondaries and taking potential damage. It does a really good job of being more of like a spear and pushing an enemy's flank. So early game, you kind of sit back a little bit, then you push in using all of your HP and all of your armor to be able to push in through a flank. It does have the same HP as a Kremlin and roughly the same exact armor except for the deck armor, but it does amazingly well. And the F key does make its dispersion way more accurate, so you'll be slapping players left and right with it. So I'd highly recommend it. The cost is 26,000 doubloons, so if I know it's a lot, but I would definitely recommend it. I normally don't recommend a lot of ships that are this price, but for the Sibir, I make an exception since of how strong it is. All right, moving on to the cruisers, we're going to move on to the tier 8s, or the tier 8s. For the tier 8s, we're going to be talking about the Mainz. Now, the Mainz is one of the best tier 8 cruisers in the game. Great HE, great AP. It also got a heal recently with the changes they were doing. You also get a 6-kilometer hydro, is really good as well, and a fighter. It has 12 guns with a really fast reload, good HE, good AP. It does really well at long distance farming, so it does good in PvP and PvE modes, and same with the Sibir I previously mentioned. And overall, it's just amazing well. It also has torpedoes as well, so if you do have to do a drive-by, which I don't really recommend, but if you do have to, it does do well at that as well. But overall, it does amazingly well. Now, the other ship that is well the same tiers is the Bayard, but it doesn't have a heal. So I'd recommend the Mainz since it's more versatile than the Bayard. Like, this is way better at longer distance where you're able to use AP around 12 kilometers on broadside cruisers and battleships to do a lot of damage, but you're mostly going to be spamming HE with the high HE pen to do tons of damage and fire damage. Would highly recommend it. Moving on to the tier 9, it's going to be the Ägir. Now, I'm going to do two different versions of the gear. It's going to be costing 18,300 doubloons. And for PvE, you can build it into secondaries since it does have 12-kilometer secondaries. So if you want to do that for PvE, you can. And for PvP, I'd recommend building more into the main guns. The ship does have 305 millimeter guns, good armor with a good survivability. The accuracy isn't the best, but when you do build it, it does help it out as well. But overall, also has a 6-kilometer hydro, and the secondaries are very nice as well with good penetration for the secondaries. I definitely recommend it for both PvE and PvE. I would just say have a different build for your preference. If you do more PvE, I would say building secondaries there. And if you want to do more for PvP, then do more main gun build where you build into gun accuracy. Now, for the tier 10, there is only one available, which is going to be the Brisbane. The Brisbane it costs 31,300 doubloons, which is a lot of doubloons. So this one's more of like a iffy choice. It's more on your preference, and I'm gonna explain why. So if you like this kind of playstyle, I'll explain it. How it is if you like playing Radar Minotaur, or you've ever been interested in the Minotaur Radar playstyle, where you're more open water, where you're able to hunt destroyers more, or you're able to do more flexibility with torpedoes, this is going to be the ship for you. It does have a 12-kilometer. Let me see, is it 12-kilometer? I gotta double check. It was 12 or 13.5. It's 13.5. Okay. So it has 13.5-kilometer torpedoes, while the Minotaur has 10. It has essentially the same guns as the Minotaur, except this has HE and AP, but it doesn't have the special AP that the Minotaur does, so it does lose that. But it does get a 12-kilometer radar over the Minotaur's 10, and also gets the same hydro of 5 kilometers. It does get the British acceleration as well, so it's just as maneuverable as the Minotaur. It's just a more versatile version where you can use the longer range torpedoes to help push off a flank, as well as using your radar to be able to push off destroyers and fighting destroyers. With the HE AP, it does really well overall in both PvP and PvE modes, and you do get a ton of torpedoes. You get a total of 10 per side, so a total of 20 torpedoes, which is a lot of torpedoes to be throwing into the water. Okay, so moving on to the destroyers, let's do the Cossack. So we're going to do tier 8s. The tier 8 is going to be the Cossack. That is going to be the British destroyer. As you can see here, it's 11,300 doubloons. And this thing is a little monster. This is one of the best PvP destroyers in the game at tier 8. It does amazingly well. It has good AP, good HE, as well as a 3-kilometer hydro, engine boost, and a short burst smoke, which allows it to get in and out of engagements rather quickly. It also has 10-kilometer torpedoes, which is really nice for tier 8s. Overall, this thing is a little monster at tier 8. There aren't that many other destroyers at that tier that can put up a fight against this thing. This thing is just an absolute brute and pushes out all other destroyers at the tier. So for 11,300 doubloons, I definitely recommend it. This one does pretty well in PvP. PvE, not as much. Now moving on is one that's a little bit more flexible in between PvP and PvE. It's going to be the Jäger. The Jäger costs 21,800 doubloons. It is slightly higher than the rest. That's 18,300, but I'm going to explain why. This essentially is one of the stealthiest destroyers in the game, as well as having one of the highest DPMs of the game of torpedoes. It gets 12 torpedoes with 4 3-sets of triple sets of torpedoes or turrets, where you're able to cycle like every 15 to 16 seconds. You can launch torpedoes downrange over and over and over and over again. And these torpedoes are really fast, like 90 knots speed fast, and you're able to put out tons of damages, and you're able to get permafloods really easily with this thing. And essentially, if something's pushing into you, it's going to be almost impossible for them to dodge your torpedoes. And this does really well in PvP and PvE. The guns aren't the best. You're not supposed to use the guns. You're supposed to use the torpedoes. So that is your main strength. It doesn't have good anti-air either, but it does have a very strong cruise of 5.4 kilometers. It has an engine boost and a heal, which is really nice. But overall, this thing is one of the best torpedoes in the game. Good speed as well, so I'd highly recommend it for that 21,800 doubloons. Moving on to the tier 10, there is no tier 10 destroyer that you can currently buy for doubloons, so I'm not going to recommend any coal or steel battleships due to the fact that the Holiday Convoy event is going on right now. So what I'm going to recommend instead is that I'm going to recommend the Hofmann that's in here. Now, the Hofmann is essentially a Schultz that's in the Elbing tech tree line that's made to a tier 10. And it has essentially the same AP as the Elbing without the improved pen angles. This allows you to have really strong pen that can do heavy damage to battleships and cruisers alike, and allows you to citadel cruisers as well when they're broadside. It also has really great HE damage, unlike the Elbing line where it doesn't have that good of HE damage, but it also has the slight armor as well on the side, which helps you against destroyers of the same tier. It also has 12-kilometer torpedoes that are fast reloading, which helps you put out even more DPM. It also has, but yeah, with the 6-kilometer hydro, the smoke, great guns, great torpedoes, what's not to love about it, right? So I highly recommend it. Great in PvP and also good in PvE. So highly recommend it. All right, moving on, let's talk about the aircraft carriers. Aircraft carriers, there are only 2 tiers for aircraft carriers since they're only tier 8 and tier 10 are the ones I'll be recommending. There's a tier 6, but I'm not going to recommend those. I'm just going to recommend the tier 8 and tier 10. For the tier 8, I'm going to be recommending the Kaga. Kaga costs 11,300 doubloons. The reason why I recommend it is that it has the largest amount of planes out of any aircraft carrier in the game, so it's almost impossible to deplane this thing, which is very forgiving. It has great torpedoes that are great against cruisers and battleships. The dive bombers are great against destroyers, cruisers, and battleships alike, and the attack fighters are great against cruisers and battleships. It's good in both PvE and PvE modes, so I definitely recommend the Kaga. Moving on to the tier 10, there is no tier 10s that you can buy, so we're going to go back to the Holiday Convoy event since I don't want to recommend any coal or steel ships at the moment, so I'm going to say put your resources that you would spend on those into the Holiday Convoy event and get the Indepencia instead. The Indepencia gets the FDR torpedoes that do massive damage, like 30,000 damage salvos with their torps, but it doesn't have the long cooldown in between strikes, so it can keep hitting you back to back to back. It does absolutely massive salvos with those torpedoes. It gets 2 attack fighter squadrons where one of them is better against destroyers and light cruisers, and the other one's better against battleships and heavy cruisers. So I definitely recommend the Indepencia for that. Moving on to the final class, which is going to be the submarines. I was a little bit debating on this one because there are 2 great choices for submarines at tier 8. One is the S-189 and one is the I-56. I overall went with the S-189 since it's more versatile than the I-56. I-56 doesn't do as well in PvP, while the S-189 does better in both PvE and PvP since it's more focused on non-homing torpedoes and has the submarine surveillance and the hydrophone, while the I-56 only has the hydrophone, so it can't really counter enemy destroyers in PvP. So I'd recommend the S-189 instead. Has good torpedoes, has great concealment, is good against submarines and PvP and PvE modes. So I'd highly recommend the S-189 for the 11,300 doubloons. And finally, there are no submarines you can buy for doubloons for submarines as of right now, and I'm not going to recommend coal or steel ones at the moment since I would be recommending people to put the resources for the Holiday Convoy event. So as of right now, I wouldn't recommend any of the tier 10 submarines unless you're not wanting to get anything for the Holiday Convoy event. Then I would just recommend the U-45 since it's one of the strongest submarines in the game, super fast underwater, great torpedoes, essentially just a little monster. But anywho, that is going to be it for today's video. If you guys have any questions or concerns, if you like this kind of style video, let me know in the comments. Let me know if you guys agree with most of this list or if you don't, and I will see you guys in the next video. Deuces.